Buckingham Palace holds a unique place in Britain's heart. Its balcony is a focus for national rejoicing. The Queen's grandparents appeared there, so did her parents. At the end of the war, Churchill was there. On the Queen's wedding day and after her coronation, all the royal family were there. When Prince Charles married Lady Diana Spencer, they took their place on the palace balcony. Now, a more controversial couple are set for balcony parades. Crowds flocked to the palace on the Queen's official birthday in June to see the royal family celebrate with a balcony appearance. Now she faces a dilemma, whether to invite Charles's new wife Camilla, with all the connotations of her past role as his mistress.
Nobody really wants to poke into the murky past and history of Charles and Camilla's relationship. The word adultery seems to have been Tipp-X'd out. But the truth of the matter is that they did have an adulterous relationship, and that in 1975 the Queen, who didn't want to blame her son for being in an adulterous relationship, said that she would never have Camilla Parker Bowles in the same room as her ever again. The Queen is aware that adultery has occurred. She knows what the consequences have been. She won't forget it, and you won't be seeing Camilla on the balcony at Buckingham Palace when the Queen is there.
1990 marked the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Britain. As the royal family watched the fly past, they didn't know that scandal would soon engulf them and threaten the monarchy itself. Their troubles really began in 1960 when Princess Margaret, the Queen's sister, married Lord Snowdon. She would be the first senior royal to divorce in modern times. In 1973, the Queen's only daughter, Princess Anne, married Mark Phillips, another union doomed to unravel. Anne would later remarry in a low-key ceremony. The spectacular wedding of Charles and Diana was meant to secure the future of the Windsor dynasty. The fabulous ceremony one sunny July day in 1981 was the royal family's own fairy tale. The dark secret of Camilla, a guest at that wedding, was concealed. Later, Diana said, "There were 3 of us in this marriage." Sarah Ferguson, Fergie, married Prince Andrew in 1986. Their marriage, said the Archbishop, was a precious gift to the nation. Their bridal path too would be strewn with broken promises and shattered hopes. Divorce and scandal would tear apart the Queen's family.
In the last 20 years, the British royal family has survived some pretty catastrophic events, and they have all in different ways put that future under threat. I think by marrying Camilla, Charles hopes that he is going to secure the future of the royal family. I'm afraid I can't agree with him. I think that by marrying Camilla, Charles is taking the royal family into dangerous new territory. Camilla is going to become the most senior woman in the country after the Queen. That's a heck of a jump for a mistress, for somebody who only within very recent memory was an extremely unpopular figure, given her role, her central role in breaking up Charles and Diana's marriage, which was, after all, the cornerstone of the Windsor's future.
Summer 2004, Balmoral Castle in Scotland. The Queen reluctantly began the process of change. After a series of joint appearances by Charles and Camilla, the Queen became convinced that the issue needed resolution in her own lifetime.
There were meetings at Balmoral, I think they started on June the 4th, where the Queen was up there for a few days, staying in a lodge away from the main house, and a series of advisors came up from London, and they started talking about the constitutional implications of the marriage. But at Christmas time, Charles decided, we really do want to get married, and talked with the Queen about it while she was at Sandringham, and that set things in motion for an announcement in February.
I definitely feel the Queen's hand was forced. I think we can see over the period of the last 3 or 4 years that she's been snookered more than once. She has been pushed by Prince Charles and his courtiers into doing things that she would prefer not to do. She was forced to meet Camilla Parker Bowles at a party at Highgrove, which Charles gave. She didn't want to do it, but Prince Charles said, "You don't do that, and I don't come to the Queen Mother's 100th birthday." The Queen does not accept Camilla Parker Bowles, and that is a problem for the future.
Ludlow, 2003.
For many years now, Ludlow Racecourse has needed a new stand in the catapult enclosure. An enormous trouble has been taken to try and build a stand.
This was a nostalgic visit for Charles. In opening the new Jubilee stand, Charles recalled an earlier day when he had raced at Ludlow as an amateur jockey. He stayed to see the Prince of Wales Challenge Trophy race, named after his earlier chase in October 1980, when Lady Diana Spencer, his teenage girlfriend, watched with Camilla Parker Bowles. They saw him race into second place on his horse, Alibar. Diana didn't know then that Camilla was really his mistress. Charles admitted his long liaison with Camilla in a television interview in 1994. Their affair mirrored an historic romance. Charles's great-great-grandfather, Edward VII, and Alice Keppel, Camilla's great-grandmother, were lovers. Alice was beautiful, elegant, and discreet. The more adventurous Camilla emulated her role model, but came out of the shadows with minor charity roles. However, it seemed that she too was content to remain a mistress.
I think Camilla can never have imagined ever that she would become a duchess, a princess, maybe even a queen in time. She had a teenage ambition to emulate her great-grandmother, Alice Keppel, who had an affair with King Edward VII. She thought that she too could perhaps be a royal mistress, but she never thought that it would be anything more than that. Now we look at it and we see that Alice Keppel is a mere footnote in history. Camilla is going to make a whole chapter.
Charles had met Camilla in 1972. They had a brief affair until he began his naval duties in early 1973. He was away until September. In July, Camilla married his friend, handsome Guards officer Andrew Parker Bowles, a favourite at the royal court.
Camilla was 6 years into a 7-year campaign to marry Andrew Parker Bowles. She knew that she was disqualified from becoming Princess of Wales on 3 counts. One, that her looks weren't up to it. Secondly, that her aristocratic lineage wasn't up to it. And thirdly, she was no virgin. And so there was never a chance that she was ever going to be Princess of Wales, and she knew it.
She has been in the background for the better part of his life as a constant supporter and friend in good times and bad. But the promotion from mistress to wife is notoriously tricky in royal history. There is a convention that a mistress may not look beyond her post. Well, it looks as if this one is looking beyond her current position. If she came into this room now, we would be required, expected, to stand up and bow to her.
Protocol prevented Camilla from joining Charles at many family or official events. If the Queen was present, Camilla was segregated. Charles was faced with a choice: leave the situation as it was, or try to resolve it by marriage.
He was damned if he did, and he was damned if he didn't, really. He's had a lot of embarrassment to put up with because Camilla has been prevented from going to spend Christmas with the royal family, Easter with the royal family. And then in November last year, Charles and Camilla were due to go to a wedding at Chester Cathedral. The Prince's godson was getting married, and Camilla was told that she wouldn't be able to sit with him because of royal protocol. She was going to have to sit behind him or possibly on the other side of the church from him. And it was just an embarrassment too far, a humiliation too far. The thing about all of this, we talk about royal protocol as if it's set in stone, but really royal protocol is what the monarch of the day decides. And so essentially that's just the Queen showing her distrust and disapproval of the relationship.
Queen Rania of Jordan's backing gave the couple the encouragement they needed for their first public kiss. Charles has tried for a long time to persuade the public, the church, and his own parents that he should make Camilla his wife.
I don't think that Charles is impelled by a sense of duty to marry Camilla. I think this is something that he has devoutly wished for many, many years. It's he alone, and against a great deal of opposition from courtiers, from the Queen, from Prince Philip, who's been steamrolling through this idea that he could actually marry Camilla and get away with it. Now, we still have to see whether this gamble is going to come off, because a great proportion of the British public are really undecided as to whether this is going to be a good move or not.
Just a year after Diana's tragic death, Charles claimed he has been tortured over Camilla. "I thought the British people were compassionate, but I don't see much of it," he complained to an author.
I think this is where Prince Charles often goes wrong, when he complains about the people not showing him compassion. He often comes over as being a bit too sorry for himself, a bit unsure of himself, somebody who flounders, somebody who can't make a decision. He just seems to feel that it's his destiny to be the king, it's his destiny to do what he wants in his private life, and nobody has a right to criticise him. And I think this is where he's gone wrong in many ways.
Charles and Camilla often hold lavish functions to attract wealthy patrons to his charities. On such occasions, Camilla is dressed in expensive couture gowns and wears heirloom jewels. Like Alice Keppel, Camilla has become a woman of considerable substance.
King Edward VII left his mistress, Alice Keppel, Camilla's great-grandmother, vastly wealthy when he died. He made sure that she had enough money in her coffers, not only for her own lifetime, but for the lifetime of her children and great-grandchildren. And it is true that Camilla has lived off some of the money which her great-grandmother left and passed down. I think that Prince Charles, almost certainly looking to history, will have made exactly the same provisions, and Camilla will be very rich when he dies.
Camilla will still have to endure comparisons with Diana. As Charles's fiancée, the teenage Diana was already an attractive girl with an eye-catching figure. Highly photogenic, she soon outshone Charles, who grew jealous of his glamorous young wife. To others, her visual appeal, together with her sparkling personality, proved an irresistible combination. She became a national asset, a roving ambassador for her country.
Diana could flirt for Britain, and it is an underused diplomatic weapon. I mean, innocent flirting, which is what it was, can have a very disarming effect on the most unlikely people. And it was one of Diana's great talents, I think, that while she was very, very conscious of the need to carry out this sort of high-level diplomatic activity to the letter, and she was extremely conscientious about it, nevertheless, she could add her own bit of sparkle. And she did, over and over again. I mean, the President of Egypt, the President of the United States, the President of France, the President of Zimbabwe. He said, "She makes you feel good." And nobody thought that he meant that she made him feel virtuous. She gave him a good feeling. That was one of her jobs, as she saw it, to go around the world giving people good feelings, and that included presidents just as much as it included orphans and the victims of disease.
I'm only trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world.
She got out of her palace most days, and she got in her car and she went off and she did her job. And it was a very unusual job, and it was a very stressful one, but it could also be very rewarding. And the most rewarding part of it was usually the people that she met. And whether it was the East End of London or the East End of Lahore, if she met people with whom she could communicate, who needed her, who lightened her day, because the rest of her life was pretty gloomy, then that was a successful day. And she responded to that. That's what made her such a good princess. She was great at her job because she committed herself to it emotionally and mentally. Camilla Parker Bowles is in a very different situation. I think probably she must aim to attract acceptance, and maybe in the far distant future, affection too. But right now, even attracting acceptance is going to be a tough call. It's going to require a lot of things to go right, and it's going to require her to come across to the British people and to the wider world as a worthy successor to Diana.
Camilla is a woman known for hunting rather than caring. Charles has presented her through a choreographed public relations campaign with little thought about her image.
In my view, this is putting the cart before the horse. I think that what should have happened is that Camilla should have been introduced to the British nation. We know nothing about her. She's an enigma. She's hidden behind palace walls for longer than I care to remember. And she has never been out, pressed the flesh, talked to the British public, and allowed herself to be measured by their standards.
The whole thing about having a royal family is that they pay their dues, they work for their living, they earn their living by doing good deeds, by helping charitable organisations. And Camilla does virtually nothing like that. She does a little bit of help for the Osteoporosis Society, but she's not seen to be helping anybody except herself.
The British public, the world, has known of Camilla as a mistress. Now they're going to have to start thinking of Camilla as a queen. First they're going to have to start thinking of her as a Princess of Wales, which is what in effect she will be, and then they're going to have to think of her as a queen. And even if she isn't going to be queen in the foreseeable future, that is how people are going to have to picture her. That is the image she's going to have to live up to. And I think it most unlikely that she is going to sell herself to the British public, to the world at large, as anything like a suitably regal figure commanding the sort of near universal respect that a head of state needs to have.
Approaching 80, the Queen is admired throughout the world for her lifelong dedication to duty. However, there is one area where she might have done things differently. We now know through videotapes made in Diana's lifetime that she went to the Queen to seek help over Charles and Camilla, but the Queen refused to interfere. Diana decided to betray Charles and expose his affair.
It's a real pity that so many chances to produce a happier outcome went begging. I was aware that there were opportunities for other members of the royal family to help Charles and Diana through the crisis that they faced, and in particular, help Diana. She was not a natural rebel. In fact, more often she yearned for reassurance and encouragement and guidance. Whether the words couldn't be found or whether Diana didn't hear them, she felt herself excluded from the royal organization. And while she wasn't a rebel, she wasn't a wimp either. And when, as she saw it, she felt outnumbered and conspired against, she was defiant.
The Queen did not condone Camilla's conduct. The couple adopted a strategy of appearing together at events for his own charities, such as the Prince's Trust, but the Queen refused to allow Camilla to join Charles on official royal duties.
The Queen was worried about upsetting more traditional supporters of the monarchy. She didn't want Camilla to be seen to be part of the family. But of course the wedding announcement has just exacerbated the problems really, and it's proved very, very divisive.
Camilla retained a group of female friends who were almost ladies-in-waiting. Some, like Emily van Cutsem, joined her on exotic holidays. Emily has now fallen out of favour after a feud with Camilla. At the new royal court of Charles and Camilla, friends from skiing, hunting and polo want to hold sway. Among them is Charles's skiing friend and Camilla's staunchest supporter, Patty Palmer Tompkinson. She reunited them 4 years after Charles's marriage. She might be considered a queen-maker. Patty and husband Charlie's daughters, Santa, a romantic novelist, and Tara, a dedicated partygoer and reformed drug addict, are among the prince's social set. The Queen chooses less exuberant friends. For Charles, such public frivolity will have to end when he eventually succeeds his mother. For Camilla, adulation from her supporters needs to be tempered with constraint.
It's said that Camilla is from good, middle-of-the-road English county stock. And it may well be that that transforms very happily into good royal stock as well. A lot depends on how she perceives herself, how she uses her new position. It's an enormously influential one. It rather depends, to be brief, on whether she takes herself rather grandly or whether she keeps a sense of proportion.
Camilla will not use the title Princess of Wales. She will be Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cornwall. As Duke of Cornwall, Charles benefits from the vast revenues of the duchy. He has an income of around £12 million a year, on which he pays only voluntary tax. Recently, a parliamentary committee started investigating his finances.
One of the most embarrassing moments in Charles's recent past is the investigation by the House of Commons Public Accounts Committee, where they showed that he was getting away with blue murder.
This is a man, Prince Charles, who has about 100 personal staff to look after just him. I mean, the Queen doesn't get close to having that many.
At the Queen's discretion, Camilla will now be able to use the helicopter and 2 aircraft of the Royal Air Squadron for engagements. The royal train will now be officially available. A fleet of 8 chauffeur-driven, gleaming limousines, 2 Bentleys, 3 Rolls and 3 Daimlers will be at Camilla's disposal with the Queen's permission. Carriages with footmen in livery may drive the new Duchess of Cornwall. Camilla has already entertained guests at Buckingham Palace with Charles on behalf of his charities. As his wife, she will have more frequent use of those miles of red carpet and the impressive staterooms that tourists admire each summer when the palace is open to the public. She might discover that the palace has many secrets. Some staff have run a brisk trade in unwanted gifts passed on by their royal bosses. The royals themselves have been satirized by the British press with comparisons to comic television characters. Then, an undercover reporter gained a footman's post. His detailed account of life behind palace walls contained pictures of the Queen's breakfast table, complete with Tupperware boxes. The public had only seen the state apartments. Now they found out how the Queen lived.
Clearly there was a degree of intrusion by a reporter impersonating a member of the Queen's household. Nevertheless, the revelations that he produced, such as the fact that the Queen liked her breakfast cereals served out of Tupperware boxes, was endearing and kind of warm. And I think the public were astonished by it, and I think they felt that much more about the Queen. It made her look much more like one of them, one of us.
The Queen and her family are extremely middle class, and a lot of European aristocrats look down their noses at the Windsors because their favourite preoccupations are gin and GGs and, horse racing, and they're not elegant, they don't dress well, they're dumpy, frumpy sorts of people. And they seem to think that Tupperware boxes on the breakfast table, well, that would be the sort of thing you'd expect from middle-class people like the Windsors.
As heir to the throne, Charles is used to deference when he meets the public. Camilla will expect curtsies as Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cornwall. There was no protocol when she visited Chile alone to visit Lucia Santa Cruz, an old friend who introduced her to Charles in 1972. Camilla was besieged by paparazzi and chased by interviewers. From now on, the royal machinery will protect her from nuisance as well as danger. She will have bodyguards for private holidays. The Duchess of Cornwall will enjoy official tours courtesy of the British taxpayer. She will effectively be on the public payroll. Reconnaissance visits by Charles's staff will ensure that every aspect of foreign tours run smoothly. A protective cordon will screen her from intrusive questioners. Staff will make sure that she is never put in this position again. Her cars will be checked and kept under surveillance for potential kidnap or assassination attempts. Paparazzi will be kept at a distance, and backup vehicles will prevent them from following too closely. On this visit to Chile, there was an eerie reminder of Diana's fatal crash in Paris. Camilla too was chased into a tunnel by paparazzi. Diana gave up her bodyguard in 1993 after her separation from Charles. She had to face rough treatment when she holidayed with just friends. Her former bodyguard believes that dispensing with her police protection led directly to her death in Paris after a car crash.
It's my view that had Scotland Yard been in charge of that security that night, irrespective of any conspiracy theories or any plans to attack her or take her life that night, had the security been there, provided by Scotland Yard, you and I would not be having this conversation.
I don't think she understood the degree to which her Scotland Yard protection officers made her life bearable. And I think her decision to dispense with them was rather petulant and was intended to prompt sympathy from people who pretty soon were able to see the consequences of her being unguarded.
Ken Wharf was Diana's eyes and ears. He protected her at home and abroad from attacks by assassins and stalkers. A trained marksman, his casual air belied his own role as a potential bullet catcher. Whatever the occasion, no one escaped his scrutiny. If Camilla is to follow in Diana's footsteps, she will need another Ken to shadow her and keep the press at bay. Here in Egypt, Ken showed he was good at dealing with the press, allowing Diana the chance to pose for photographers before continuing her tour. On this trip, while she stayed at the ambassador's residence in Cairo, Ken kept guard while she took a dip in the pool.
Diana was pretty streetwise, and she had, very, very good peripheral vision. And I think it was her, actually, at the same time as myself, spotted some people on a roof on a high-rise building nearby. I was almost certain that it was the media that were taking pictures of Diana in the pool. All I did to help that was to try and obscure the shots that were being taken. Well, it didn't always work. And that wasn't necessarily my role, but in fact, if you look at it from a security standpoint, it was actually not a bad thing to do. But of course, Diana was discussing it then and saying, look, what do I do here? Do I have to get out? I said, well, no, stay there, do what you want. She said, well, I never get any peace here, do I? I said, well, no, but that's part and parcel of being the Princess of Wales. There's not much I can do about it.
Ken was a reliable companion too, especially every August when the royal family returned to their Highland retreat, Balmoral.
There are aspects of Balmoral life she didn't like, but very often she would ring me up and say, look, I need to go for a walk. And I would go and we'd walk for miles along the River Dee, and that was her freedom. But I think there were many aspects of Balmoral that she actually rather enjoyed. Towards the end, of course, the relationship, it was just too close for home. You've got the mother-in-law and your father-in-law, and you're a bit on a limb there, and so she's rather dependent on speaking to members of her staff.
Staff saw Charles and Diana in less formal surroundings of Highgrove, the couple's country home in Gloucestershire. This was their weekend retreat. Charles and his sons kept their pets there. Charles's dog Tigger was unpopular with some of the staff.
Tigger and Mervyn, the chef, didn't have a very good relationship because Mervyn didn't want dogs in the kitchen, but one morning Tigger made a run for something that fell out of the pan, at which point Mervyn grabbed the dog by the back of the neck and then opened up the heater tray of the oven and put the dog in the heater tray. And of course, who should come in, literally almost immediately, was the Prince of Wales, who said, has anybody seen Tigger? Well, I couldn't actually turn around and say, sorry sir, the dog's in the oven. But he did go outside and come back in. I said, Mervyn, get the dog out, because the dog now was instead of being a sort of semi-rough-haired skinned Jack Russell, was now a smooth-skinned Russell with a sort of fairly high temperature. So we got it moving through it in the hallway, and the Prince came through the door and said, Tigger, there you are. He said, you look amazingly hot.
Camilla is learning that the staff play a crucial role in any palace. They're also aware of any tensions in the relationships of their bosses.
Palace is a pretty lonely place, and, members of the royal family rely upon members of staff, your valets, your butler, your maid, or whatever you want to call it. In the Prince and Princess of Wales' case, it was pretty obvious that the marriage was going through a difficult period. But it was kept very much under wraps. You know, everybody knew in the circle of her friends, everybody knew that worked within the palace that there were problems with their marriage, and it wasn't too difficult to see that. I think it's a credit here to her staff that very little was said.
Working in royal residences means poor pay and long hours. Some staff have found other ways of increasing their income, such as selling information and trinkets passed on to them by their bosses. Recent events have made their livelihood and security uncertain.
You're always prey to the Royal Order of the Boot. You know, you can be in one day and out the next. And it's very much been tightened up because of all the leaks and because, you know, a Daily Mirror reporter got a job there and then revealed far too much for the Queen's liking. So you're hampered. You've got to sign all these secrecy acts, confidentiality agreements, and the pay is a pittance.
That's why so many of them were selling off these gifts. They pick up these trinkets and things, or letters or whatever, and they sell them on eBay, or they sell them through people in America who adore the royal family, and to supplement their appalling pay.
Paul Burrell, Diana's butler, worked for the Diana Memorial Fund after her death. With her secretary, Jacqueline Allen, they were honoured guests at an American fundraising event. This gift to Burrell from Diana and other items was sold to raise money for good causes. A replica of the blue diamond necklace worn by Kate Winslet in the film Titanic raised over £1 million. Then it emerged that Burrell had stashed hundreds of the princess's belongings in his home. Charged with theft, he was tried at the Old Bailey. His court case was a fiasco. He was cleared when the Queen recalled a conversation in which he told her he was safeguarding some of the princess's papers. Later, he revealed details of his private talk with the Queen.
The Burrell trial collapsed because it should never have gone ahead in the first place. I mean, they made a fundamental mistake. They were misled, the royals, by what was presented to them by the police. Had the Prince of Wales taken the advice that was proffered to him by a number of senior figures on his staff, to have met with Burrell, to hear with Burrell before the case began, he could have resolved it. Burrell was no threat to them. All the material that Burrell had was buried in his attic. It wasn't going to be sold, it wasn't going to go anywhere. But it went ahead, he was prosecuted, and the trial collapsed like many of us knew it would do, because he had done fundamentally nothing wrong.
Burrell then betrayed secrets about Diana, Charles and Camilla in a book. It was serialised with explosive headlines in a tabloid paper.
He betrayed Diana, there's no two ways about it. The man who said for years he would never leak anything did it just to make money, because he was so upset when he lost his job and his home when Diana died. And he couldn't forgive the royal family. He went to see the Queen, begged her to let him stay on in Kensington Palace, and she said no.
After Diana's death, her royal jewellery was returned to the palace. The princess had many heritage items, some, like this necklace, dating to the Queen's grandmother.
The boys inherited most of Diana's jewellery that wasn't part of the royal collection, and they went and chose certain pieces that they wanted. I believe that Harry took her Cartier watch and William took her engagement ring. But obviously, her personal jewellery is being kept for them and their future wives. The tiaras that belonged to the Queen that she'd borrowed, which get handed down from generation to generation, would have gone back into the royal jewellery pool.
The Duchess of Cornwall might well be seen wearing some of the royal gems, even some of the Queen's personal collection. Perhaps not the state diadem, a crown jewel, but there are 7 other sumptuous tiaras, including the Queen's favourite, the pearl and diamond tiara and the Russian fringe tiara. There are 15 important necklaces, scores of earrings, bracelets and rings in the collection, plus many other pieces from earlier queens. On their engagement, Charles gave Camilla a diamond ring which belonged to the late Queen Mother. It's worth £500,000. In 1901, after the death of Queen Victoria, Edward VII, Alice Keppel's lover, and his queen, Alexandra, were crowned. Alexandra wore a crown containing the fabulous Koh-i-Noor diamond, said to bring bad luck to a male owner. The Queen Mother wore it in her own consort's crown on her coronation day in 1937. It was placed on her coffin at her funeral in 2002. Now in the Tower of London with the crown jewels, could it be worn next by Camilla at Charles's coronation? Alice Keppel knew that her part in Edward VII's life was strictly private. A softening up the public campaign, waged for several years, has driven the course of events leading to Charles's second marriage. Although divorced in 1996, in the eyes of some people, Diana's death made him a widower. Camilla had divorced in 1995. She was a guest at Charles's first wedding. Press began to speculate on her possible marriage to Charles. First, there were religious and constitutional obstacles to be overcome. Similar difficulties faced Edward VIII in 1936. His Prime Minister, Stanley Baldwin, forced him to choose between the throne and divorcee Wallis Simpson. For her, he abdicated. They married in France and lived in exile. Their memory still haunts the royal family. Princess Margaret also faced a stark choice between keeping her royal position and marrying Group Captain Peter Townsend, a divorced man. Margaret owed her loyalty to her sister, the newly crowned Queen, and had to abide by the prevailing standards of the 1950s.
Princess Margaret didn't get married in 1953 because the government of the day advised the Queen that it would not be acceptable to the British public, largely because of the Church of England's reservations.
In 1992, the divorced Princess Anne sidestepped the Church of England. She married Tim Lawrence at Balmoral's Crathy Church, under the easier rules of the Church of Scotland. George Carey, then the Archbishop of Canterbury, explored ways to allow Charles and Camilla to marry. The compromise of a civil wedding and a church blessing was made by his successor, Rowan Williams.
The Church has had a very significant role in forcing Charles's hand in marriage. They have been very uncomfortable for a long time to see Charles and Camilla living, as they see it, in sin.
They seem to be divided about it. There's one section of the Church that believes that people should be allowed a second chance of happiness, and then there's another group who believe that marriage is sacred and that the guilty parties in a divorce especially should not be allowed to remarry. So I can see that the sort of old guard in the Church of England would say, no, can't possibly marry them.
Charles's civil wedding problems go back to 1836, when Queen Victoria was still heir to the throne. In 1840, the young Queen married her German cousin, Prince Albert, in a religious service at the Chapel Royal at St James's Palace. Group Captain Peter Townsend and Princess Margaret were prevented from marrying in a civil ceremony by the 1836 Act and by a later one.
There are various laws governing marriages of the royal family. We go back to the 1836 Marriage Act, the 1949 Marriage Act, which both appear very, very clearly to prevent members of the royal family from marrying in civil ceremonies. There's a danger that if this law isn't tested now in court, then future members of the royal family run the risk of getting married illegally and their spouses losing rights of inheritance. Unless the government changes the law now, somebody is going to prove that that marriage is illegal.
It is legally contentious, and I'm afraid that's going to go into the history books. And for better or worse, and I fear it may be for worse, when people look back on this whole episode, the fact that it was legally dubious is going to be one of the things that they notice and don't like.
Charles took advice from Britain's Lord Chancellor over the legality of a civil wedding. He was told that human rights legislation overturned previous laws banning the royal family from having civil weddings.
The great thing about the royal family is they make it up as they go along. They can do anything they want. What they like to do is they like to cite precedent, and if they want to do something and it hasn't been done recently, they can say, oh, it was done in Henry VIII's time, it's done in Queen Victoria's time. If they haven't got a precedent, then they just make it up and say, oh, well, that's how it should be anyway. And the great thing is really that they get away with murder simply because they want to. And it's very interesting to see how inventive they can be with their own rules.
Perhaps Camilla's biographer is right to be cynical. It was also claimed that members of the royal family did not have to post their banns of marriage, but Charles was quick to do so in Cirencester, a town near his country home. Charles's title makes it an unusual addition to the local list. By attending Sunday service at a parish close to Highgrove, he is trying to avoid a rift with the wider church over his civil wedding. Settling for a church blessing will not satisfy everyone, and some might not regard his marriage as valid. Soon after his engagement, Charles made an official visit to Australia without Camilla. He faced an unenthusiastic reception. His visit coincided with 2 new royal stars. Stealing the show were Crown Prince Frederick of Denmark and his Tasmanian-born wife, Princess Mary, a former Sydney estate agent. Her presence recalled an earlier visit in 1983 when the young Princess Diana made her first official tour of Australia. Diana and Charles received a rapturous reception. These were the glory days of the British royal family. Surely Camilla cannot hope for such popularity.
I imagine that reaction to Camilla in Australia will be comparable to reaction to Camilla here, in that some people will think she's a good thing. Not many, I suspect. More people will think that she's no substitute for Diana, and that in fact, by taking Diana's place, Charles is showing a lack of respect for Diana. But the great majority will be more or less indifferent.
Opinion polls seem to show that support for a republic is growing again in Australia, and when Australians are faced with the prospect of Charles becoming their next king with Camilla as his wife, support for a republic has grown even more in the opinion polls.
Charles should also consider the reactions of all the 15 nations of the Commonwealth, where the Queen is head of state.
I think the Commonwealth has been sadly neglected, not so much by the Queen, who takes her duty to the Commonwealth as head of the Commonwealth very seriously, but I know that Prince Charles is not as enthusiastic about his Commonwealth duties as his mother is, and I think it's a matter of great regret that the future of the British monarchy seems to be turning its attention rather more towards Europe than towards the remaining bits of the world which look to Buckingham Palace for a lead, for a symbolic head.
Windsor Castle was announced as the venue of the wedding. Many royal marriages and christenings have taken place within its ancient stone walls. St George's Chapel was used in 1992 for a wedding attended by all the royal family. It was the marriage of Lady Helen Windsor, daughter of the Queen's cousin, the Duke of Kent. And in 1999, Prince Edward married Sophie Rhys-Jones at St George's Chapel. He is the only one of the Queen's children who is not divorced. The chapel is ornate and regally splendid, with the atmosphere of a cathedral. Charles' plans to marry there were dashed by a legal technicality.
It emerged after they'd made the announcement, a rather hurried announcement provoked by a leak to a newspaper, that they couldn't get married in Windsor Castle without allowing the public to get married there for the following 3 years. The Queen was horrified at the thought of her weekends being interrupted by members of the public coming in to get married, and all sorts of chaos would ensue.
Charles's officials are starting from scratch with this one, and they're trying to blend in with the Queen's household and what it requires. And I think that it's hardly surprising that here and there things have come unstuck.
The couple will now make the short journey from the castle through the town of Windsor to the Register Office in the Guildhall. The low-key ceremony will be held in the Ascot Room, There will be no television cameras, and only Camilla's family and Charles's sons will attend. Notably, the Queen will be absent.
It does go against the grain for the Queen not to go to the wedding. Monarchy is all about theatre, really, and I think part of the problem is the Queen was worried that this was turning into a farce, and she didn't want to be associated with something that is making the monarchy the object of ridicule all around the world at the moment.
How different it all was the last time Charles married. Around the world, 750 million watched the event. Many of those who believed the fairy tale are still angered by Charles's deception and the tragic loss of Diana.
I think the public are very cynical about the royal family. I think the image of them has deteriorated year by year for the last 15 or 20 years. There are too many people who really don't trust Prince Charles at all, and I don't think they want him as the king.
People under 40 think the Queen and other members of the royal family, they're just celebrities like Michael Jackson or Robbie Williams, and there's a soap opera going on and they're quite interested every now and then to see what the latest instalment of the soap opera is. For people over 40, they still generally take the monarchy quite seriously, and it's those people in particular, I think, who've been upset by the prospect of a future king getting married to a woman whose adultery with Charles helped cause the breakdown of the marriage to Diana.
February 1981, Charles and Diana faced the cameras for their engagement. Notice Diana's reply to the interviewer.
And I'm amazed that she's been brave enough to take me on. And I suppose in love.
Of course.
Whatever in love means.
February 2005, another engagement to another English blonde. Uncannily, her words echo Diana's, of course.
Did you get down on one knee to propose?
Camilla is reluctant to be compared to Diana with her extraordinary appeal. So far, Camilla has adopted only a limited charity profile.
She will never be someone who undertakes an awful lot of royal duties, someone who is constantly in the newspapers. She will try anyway to be somebody who is in the background, just supporting her husband and getting along very quietly with being a member of the royal family. She clearly is somebody who is very well suited for Charles. People who meet her say that she is very good at putting them at their ease. She's a very strong, steady person, and I think Charles is somebody who needs constant reassurance. His personal life is a bit of a disaster, and that's what's threatening the monarchy.
Camilla will be in the royal carriage parade at Ascot races each summer. She has to be seen as part of the family so that she is accepted as princess consort when Charles is king. For the present, the Duchess of Cornwall will be the second lady in the land, Princess of Wales in all but name, and she could still become queen.
With Charles and Camilla, we're into new territory. The guys who are actually having organised this thing don't have any precedent to refer to. There isn't a book of rules, so they're having to make it up as they go along. Prince Charles obviously believes that he could ascend the throne with Camilla by his side. Whether she's called a princess consort or a queen is pretty irrelevant. I think the rule is that the wife of the king is automatically the queen. So in his eyes, this is quite doable.
We will wait and see whether the jury of public opinion will actually come out in his favour. It's a very tricky road ahead for the Prince of Wales. He's put his reputation on the line with this marriage. We're going to have to see whether he can get away with it.
The same prince, another wife, a second fairy tale. Based on scandal and tragedy, this one cannot be sold as a storybook romance. The question now is, can the monarchy survive a King Charles and a Queen Camilla?